Let's move to our next question because I think it focuses us in some ways on kind of that new business case that you and I had the chance to talk about yesterday. It gets to the action. What can inclusive leaders do to neutralize the potential harm from these attacks? We'll talk a little bit about that and stay strong in their work. And where I would love for you to start is one of the things we talked about yesterday around data, because and I see this in our practice as well, where if the only data available is headcount representational data, and globally that also gets pretty thin because often
Hmm.
gender is the only counting that's going on, even with regards to identities. Talk a little bit, this is a starting point for this question around the power of data and the risk to organizations, kind of per the last question, when they are more generous with other kinds of data but afraid or only can see the risk in either in both collecting data, sharing data like they do on everything else with their leaders, and then expecting the data to actually turn into action that reflects what the organization is, what's true in the organization from a wider lens than just headcount.
Yeah, it makes me think about a common phrase I use with some of my clients, which is FOFO, fear of finding out. And it's a very universal concern. I think it's very normal. They might have a hunch before they even run their survey that things aren't as peachy as they would hope it is. But this lack of knowledge is a smokescreen or an excuse almost for them to not have to do anything, right? If you don't see a problem, then you can pretend like it doesn't exist, right? It's the same logic behind if you don't test for COVID, you don't have COVID, right? Or what we see in other settings, if you never assess cybersecurity concerns, then your cybersecurity is great. That's a very common sentiment that I hear from my colleagues in that sector. It's the same for DEI. There's this huge fear of finding out because leaders know that once they identify disparities, they have to do something to solve them, right? But that's I think where there's enormous opportunity. And getting back to this question, what can leaders do to neutralize potential harm? I think it's just getting very clear on what DEI is.
Mhm.
I had a post on LinkedIn a couple months ago where I spoke with a gentleman on a plane, and that post ended up going pretty viral. He was reading a Wall Street Journal article, sort of denigrating DEI and talking about woke culture and yada yada. And he asked me, what is DEI work? What is it about?
Mhm.
And I knew that, he had just been reading this article. I had maybe 1 to 2 sentences before he started crossing his arms and getting skeptical. And so I said, DEI work is about eliminating discrimination and making workplaces where everyone can thrive. That's it. Like, period. And I barely elaborated past that, right? I said, this is like, that's the work. Bringing discrimination to zero for all groups and making a workplace where everybody can succeed. Every single person in your workplace has the resources and support and structure and systems that they need to succeed at work. And we need this work because our workplaces don't currently have that. Our workplaces are rampant with discrimination and bias, and people are not treated fairly. So we're here to rectify the inequity. That's it. We're here to fix it. And to the extent that we do all of these initiatives, these are all interventions, these are all attempts to fix systems. That's all. We need leaders that are able to articulate not just that, not just those 1 or 2 sentences, but to
Mhm.
be able to say, I run a marketing department. DEI is important to us because we want to make sure that in our department, no one is being treated unfairly. Everyone's given the resources they need to succeed, and we've built a culture and an environment with policies and processes that work for everyone. Like, straight up, there's no world in which that would be controversial, right? There is no world in which you could get away
Mhm.
with saying, you know what? I love inequality. I
Yeah.
love mistreating people.
Mhm.
But because leaders aren't able to say that with confidence, right? Then that leaves room for this DEI is a woke agenda, blah blah, to
Mhm.
sneak in to these conversations. So I really try to help leaders understand very tactically, instrumentally what it is they're trying to achieve, what that looks like for them. And if you can give them numbers and data, not just representational data, because how useful is it to
Right.
tell a leader like,
Right.
hey, your department is 30% women overall on average. That's it. Every leader I can imagine would say, well, it'd be better if it was 50%, but guess we'll keep trying, and then just move on to their next
Yeah.
action item.
Yeah.
But instead,
Yeah.
if you're able to say, we have broken down, so even if we're looking at representation rates, we've broken
Mhm.
down representation by job level. That's already more useful. And then beyond just headcount, we can look at belonging scores. We can look at access to opportunity, promotion rates. We can look at firing rates. We can look at discrimination complaints. We can even look at the number of vacation days people use to see if there are demographic predictors of overwork, right? Like there's such a rich gold mine in this field of people analytics, which is, what we've been talking about in this conversation,
Yeah.
far, far beyond just headcount, that gives leaders such a valuable angle on DEI work because now, like I said, they
Mhm.
can see what's going on in their company. They can see all these challenges. And once they see the challenges, they know that their job as leaders can be to address each one of these challenges. That gives them efficacy. Efficacy gives them courage. Then they act, right? Like that data unlocks
Right.
everything. It unlocks
That's
so
right.
much.